Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production here at YouTube, and welcome to, of course, another Friday review. And today I am here to review The Gods Put the Demons on Earth, which is the second full-length album from Funeral Sex, who, of course, are a Brazilian, and I definitely tend to tag them as more of a alternative gothic stoner rock band. So, again, this was released through Heavy Metal Rock on March 28th of this year. Now, this was sent to me from Paul of Doomsday Records. Again, definitely hoping that I would review this, and here I am reviewing it anyways. Again, if you want to, since I did a video where I pretty much opened up that package that he had sent me where this came from, you can find on YouTube. So, without further ado, let me get into my overall thoughts on The Gods Put the Demons on Earth from Funeral Sex. Let's get into it, folks. So, before I really get into my overall thoughts on, well, The Gods Put the Demons on Earth, you know what I have to do? I have to do a track listing rundown so I can tell you, folks, what are the songs around this album, how many songs are on this album, and what is the time length for this album. And since we have at least 9 tracks here, it all clocks in at the length of 55 minutes and 37 seconds. So, this album, of course, begins with Genesis, the most demonic and diabolical creature of the face of Earth. It's Time to Die, the title track, The Last and Only Flight, Like Tears and Rain, In Memory, Hell, and then finally ending with The Apocalypse. So there you go, folks. There's your 9 tracks. Now, before ever, getting that package, from Paul, I never knew who the fuck Funeral Sex were. I didn't even know of their existence. Again, it's all before Paul sent me this stuff. Now, there was a period in time where I was definitely kind of very much into that sort of Brazilian stuff, or at least going on Bandcamp and trying to find bands within these sort of different countries like Argentina or like Brazil, and that at least were kind of would have that sort of Black Sabbath or even Pentagram kind of leanings to them, or especially after really getting into like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, who all kind of had that sort of vibe to them as well. And so I wanted to kind of find more bands that had those 70s leanings. And sure enough, I found plenty of them. That's how I found Blind Horse, which obviously I ended up befriending those guys as well. So I just found a lot of those kind of bands from these different little countries, whatever. But since then, I just haven't been that inspired to really go search on through like Bandcamp and find many more other bands, that have at least those 70s leanings. So, but with Paul, he definitely, ever since, making friends with him, he's definitely sent me plenty of stuff that at least comes close to that core style and everything, and it's just been great. It's very interesting, and he basically did it again with this album here and the stuff from Funeral Sex. So, to tell you something about this band, there's at least a tie-in to a previous album that was also recommended to me from Paul of Doomsday Records, and that ends up being a tie-in to my very first From the Mausoleum episode. So, that's of course will be More Death, because Funeral Sex features a member from that band that is Vladimir Mathias. Hope I pronounced his name correctly, who is the guitar player and vocalist of the band. And of course, there's 2 other members, that being, hope I pronounced their names correctly, Thais Pancheri on bass and Baxo Rakia. So there you go. There's at least your members of the band. And this was at least, they formed this band at least back in 2013. And they're based at a Rio Clara in the state of Sao Paulo, Brazil. So there you go. Now, again, when listening to their stuff, Funeral Sex, I would technically say that their first full-length album, which is titled Sex, Demons, and Rock and Roll, definitely is more typical of the stoner rock genre to an extent. Of course, there's a little bit of those alternative vibes going on. However, on this one, they really started to take things a little more differently. Everything's a bit more atmospheric based. The best sort of example or thing that I can just summon up their sound is like a more gothic Alice in Chains / Soundgarden. And I definitely get a little bit of the Soundgarden vibes on this sound more than I probably got on the previous ones, even though they kind of were subtly there. I mean, yes, you'll hear a lot of the 70s vibes here and there, and that's definitely probably heard in songs like the title track or like Tears in Rain, which is definitely the longest song on the album, clocking in at a little over 9 minutes long. And it's definitely there in a couple of other songs on this album. But really, I get a lot of at least Alice in Chains and Soundgarden vibes than any sort of typical sort of stoner or doom stuff. I mean, my sort of comparison when it comes to stoner would mostly be stoner metal, and that would lead to a band like High on Fire, but I don't get any of that because this is definitely more rock based than metal based. Just because it's definitely dark and very heavy and somewhat more gloomier doesn't mean that it's going to make it metal. So this definitely is not a metal record by any means, but there's definitely a pretty sort of dark and gloomy alternative gothic stoner rock album. And it is really interesting to that. It really is. Again, nothing's really progressive. Just because these songs might be long doesn't mean that these are and it's definitely not like epic doom metal kind of leanings anyways. It definitely just comes across as maybe psychedelic. Maybe there might be some psych influences being heard through some of this, but it definitely has at least a very gloomier, very gothic vibe that's being very much just surrounding the entire aura of these songs. And it's just very interesting, and I wouldn't say laid back, but just kind of gives you almost almost a very interesting mood in a way. Like you definitely can just sit down late at night, and actually listen to this, and it's almost calming to an extent. And there's definitely almost a ritualistic vibe that's being heard through some of these songs. And definitely, I definitely get that even other songs like In Memory or Hell or even like The Last and Only Flight, or even like the very first song, Genesis. Again, these songs are definitely heavy to an extent. But again, it's not metal. But it just comes across as very dark and gloomy. Again, those are the main words I use for some of these songs. And they definitely take their time with these ones. The closest I can ever say that might be kind of proggy, but I don't think it's anywhere close to that. Because again, when I think of prog, I think of very different time changes, or like the pacing all of a sudden changes and miss within the middle of a track or close to later. And I don't really get that in like Tears of Rain, but it's definitely kind of, it pushes towards that sort of spectrum, but it kind of holds itself back and kind of leaves it in a sort of almost psych element to an extent, a little bit in there. But it's just very dark. It's very epic length of some of these songs, and just the overall writing that they put into it is pretty interesting and very cool, actually. I did not expect to like this album as much as I did, because again, I like this kind of style to begin with. But anyone that kind of goes for more of a modern sort of vibe, like again, of like a Alice in Chains or a Soundgarden, that could, to some people, might be a red flag, especially on this channel, because a lot of people are more into the more traditional metal genres, like thrash and speed metal, and let alone classic hard rock from the 70s, whatever, or the new wave or British heavy metal, those kind of genres. But me, I've always been more of a fan of stuff too, as like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, and to me, I just found a lot of that sort of stylings and Funeral Sex's sound on this album, especially on this album, than any of the previous two releases. Again, just really cool. Even the Vladimir's singing is more melodic in a way. I mean, he definitely kind of gives more of a gothic vibe on this one than, let's say, he did previously, where he's kind of singing in more of a gruffer, more guttural kind of tone that still is almost trying to be more bluesy. Here, he definitely has more of a very melodic, gothic sort of tone to his voice that I think kind of fits the mood of these songs pretty great. And that's what I like. I mean, I can go into more depth to some of these songs, but to me, this is one of those albums where it's like if you're a fan of this genre and if you like it, you have to listen to it in its entirety. You can't really listen to this for like song for song stages, you know. You kind of have to take it in as a whole. And that's why I'm just going to leave things. It's a really, even the production, the mixing, for even, for modern times here, sounds pretty nice and crisp. I actually think it just sounds great. Nothing's bad on here. I just love the overall vibe. It just has a nice moody, especially for this time of October. It's perfect. So there we go. So there's, folks, there's my overall thoughts on The Gods Put the Demons on Earth, and I'm actually going to give it a rating. I am giving it, since I wrote it down, I am giving it a 8.20 out of 10. It's a pretty solid album from beginning to end. As far as favorites, would probably be It's Time to Die, the title track, and In Memory are definitely ones I really tend to enjoy the most off of here. But there's a lot of great vibes on here. Again, they use their 70s influences to their advantage, but they definitely tend to have more of an alternative, very gothic vibe for the most part on these songs, and I think it really kind of adds to the leanings that they're kind of giving on here. So it just, to me, it just makes the album a little bit more interesting and different than my normal listening habits, you know. So I give a lot of sort of kudos to this band. They really made an album that I think separates itself from the previous album. It sounds very different. They're really kind of pushing themselves a little bit further, it sounds like, and it seems like that they can end up doing the same thing. And again, probably on the next release if they ever get to that. But right now, I enjoy this one. So thank you to Paul of Doomsday Records for sending this out. Now, if you're one of those that might have heard this album, and that's probably a might, because I doubt any of you probably have listened to this album. But if you have, and that means you follow, let's say, the heavy metal rock label, whether it be positive or negative, you could leave those comments in the comment section below. But if you've never listened to this album and you like this, or if this genre, whatever, intrigues you, and if this album intrigues you, I'm going to leave you hopefully a link to maybe a YouTube page, or probably, of course, the Bandcamp page where you can check out their previous 2 releases. So with that, I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.